Hey, and welcome to another day of pre-calc. Just a reminder, please stay on top of things when you're at home. If you have any questions today, send me an email, but also tomorrow in class at the start, you'll have a chance, if you have any questions over these past 2 days of notes, you'll be able to ask some questions. So please come ready with those and send me an email if there's anything I can do to help you before then. Okay, so today we're going to talk about symmetry, which back in geometry, I'm sure you guys have talked about this. Symmetry is, if we think about it, sometimes you hear about like symmetry on the hot dog bun where you can fold the paper in half. Like a rectangle, we can fold in half, such as this. I can fold it in half, it matches up. Okay, also on the hamburger axis. Okay, that's kind of the childish way to say our x and our y-axis. Okay, so our x-axis we know is right here. And if something is symmetrical over the x-axis, it's going to be a situation where we either reflect it up or down. Okay, so we reflect it up or down. All right, now let's go ahead and we'll take a look at this point here, 2, 0. Or sorry, I misspoke. 0, 2. Okay, so 0 left and right, it's up 2. Now, if I'm going to reflect this over the x-axis, think back to geometry, it takes 1, 2 to get there. So it's going to go 1, 2 past, and that's where it will end up. It will be at the coordinate 0, negative 2. Now, if we reflect over the x-axis, our x value is not going to change. Okay, the x value stays the same. It's still always going to be the same amount left or right. It's only our y value that'll change. Okay, so our x value will stay the same. Our y value will go from positive to negative or negative to positive. It's always the opposite of whatever that is. Now that doesn't mean it only ever becomes negative, okay? If it was, say, we had started at this negative 2, the opposite of negative 2 would be positive 2 as we reflected it up. Now, for the next one, our y-axis. This is when we reflect it to the right or to the left, okay? It's still going to reflect over a straight line, except this time instead of horizontal, the line is vertical, okay? So it's going to be a reflection right or left. Now, once again, we're going to kind of choose a point somewhere over here. So let's see. If we go at negative 2, 8, and we reflect that, it's going to be at positive 2, 8. Now, this is kind of the opposite. The y value doesn't change, but the x value does change, and it changes sign. So if it was positive, it becomes negative. If it was negative, it becomes positive. It's the opposite value. Okay, your y stays the same. Now this final one, flipping it over the origin, okay, or sorry, the origin symmetry. So I need to be careful how I say that. We're not flipping it necessarily over the origin. Instead, we can think of it as kind of like a double reflection, okay? So 2 ways to think of it, either a double reflection or you can think of it as a rotation by 180. Either way, because if it's 180, it's going to end up in the same spot whether you go clockwise or counterclockwise. Okay, so for this one, if we think about it over here, it's kind of hard to tell exactly where they are, but at this point, it looks like negative 2, negative 10. So a double reflection, what I mean by that, we reflect it over the x-axis. So it comes up here to negative 2, positive 10. Then we reflect it over the y-axis, so it'll come over here, and it'll be positive 2, positive 10. So those two changes happen. And if we do that to the whole line, it ends up over up in quadrant 1 here. Okay, so in our case, both the x and the y value change when we do this. All right, so as we scroll down here now, let's take a look at these and decide if, first, are they symmetric, and if so, is it to the x-axis, the y-axis, or the origin? Okay, so a good thing to do is think, could I draw a line in between them and it would kind of fold on that line and work? Okay, so like for this one, right on the y-axis, we can draw that line. So that is our answer. It is symmetric over the y-axis. All right, this next one, there would be two places we could draw a line to make it fold. And both of them, so I could either draw it, whoa, let me work on that line. I could either draw it like that, and they would fold on it, or I could draw it like that, and they'd fold on it. But both of those go through this center point, the origin. Okay, so that's symmetric over the origin. And for this final one, I could reflect it over the x-axis. All right, so go ahead and flip to the back, and now we're going to do the same thing and decide. I want you to take a minute and decide which of these it goes over. So I just did those first three, so pause it for a second, decide which of these does the is it symmetric over? Is it over the x-axis, the y-axis, or the origin? All right, so once again, I think it helps to draw your line, kind of to see where's that line of symmetry. In our case, on this first one, it's the x-axis. Okay, on the second one, select the y-axis. Now, this third one maybe is a little more difficult because if I draw a line, it's not going to necessarily reflect over it. Okay, on the front side, I was able to draw those lines, and it's still reflected over. Instead, on this one, we need to think of it as if we rotated it 180 degrees around this origin, and that's the same as symmetric around the origin. Something that's symmetric around the origin is probably the hardest one to visualize. So always check the x and the y-axis first, and then double check, and could we like rotate it? Is there any way we can make it match up? Okay. So now, for this example, we've got these three pictures, all identical, and we're going to have the three different types of symmetry. I keep saying reflections, I meant symmetry. So we need it to be symmetric over the x-axis. So for this one, I draw on that x-axis to make it symmetric. Each of these points will drop down over that x-axis. And we draw that line in. And as you can see, my line is not perfect. I should have went right through there, but I'm not going to be a super stickler on that as long as it's pretty close. So that's a good idea. You guys know what I mean by that. Okay, so now this next one over the y-axis. So symmetric on the y-axis. I highlight the y-axis there, and this time it will come over to the left here. It's a good idea after you draw it, just think to yourself, could I fold it on that line of symmetry? And in this case, yes, I could. All right, the final one is going to be symmetric around the origin. Okay, so think of it as double reflection. Either this one reflects down and then over. This one goes down and then over. Or you can think of it as a turn of 180. Either way, you should get something like that. All right, one final thing I want us to talk about is symmetry. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. So on the front side, when we said how the x and the y is changed. So like here, if we reflect over the x-axis, the y value changes. If we reflect it over the y-axis, the x value changes. If we reflect it, or sorry, I keep saying reflect. If it's symmetric over the x-axis, the y value changes. If it's symmetric over the y-axis, the x value changes. If it's symmetric about the origin, then both the x and the y change. So, in this first one, they give us the point 6,2, and it asks us to be symmetric over the x-axis. So, for that, we're going to change the y. So, if we change the y, instead of 6,2, it becomes 6, -2. Okay, the next one, symmetric over the y-axis. So we need to change the x. So instead of 6,2, it becomes -6,2. And then the last one, the origin, it's a combination of both. So we change both. So instead of 6,2, it becomes -6, -2. All right. Your final line here, same concept. So go ahead, take a minute or a second and do that. Pause it if you need to. I want you to follow that same pattern. All right. So over the x-axis, we're going to change the y just like we did up here. So it's still going to be -3, and then it becomes -7. Over the y-axis, now we change the x value, so it becomes +3, 7. And on the last one, we're going to change both, so it becomes +3, -7. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in class tomorrow. Bye.